Hello, you are on the Ruslan Belov channel, and this is the daily summary of combat operations from the Ukrainian front. Well, in Latvia, they have called to prepare for war with Russia. The president of Serbia, Aleksandar Vučić, is also saying that Europe is actively, very actively, preparing for war with Russia. And you know, if 6 months ago everyone was still talking about peace plans, about peaceful prospects, now everyone is talking about war. Europe is preparing for war, and it seems as if we've entered a kind of rut. Or you could say the globalists are steering some EU countries toward a large-scale war between Russia and Europe. Don't you think so too? Meanwhile, the fighting on the front continues, and we continue to analyze the situation. Let's move to the map. So friends, there is a lot of news from the front today. Many good and extremely important developments. We'll discuss some of them in the second video, but we'll cover the main part right here. Let's start with the Pokrovsk direction. Just yesterday, we were analyzing the prospects of the autumn military campaign and discussing the potential capture of the city of Rodinske, as well as the prospects around Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad, how suddenly the front here began to move actively. This is the most significant progress since February. Those who closely follow the reports may remember that in February, the Ukrainian armed forces tried to counterattack here. Nothing came of it. They didn't manage to reclaim anything. The western flank of this section of the front froze, and for 8 months since February, it couldn't be moved. And, finally, it happened. Russian troops advanced from Zverev by 2 kilometers and reached the Udachna-Pokrovsk highway. The advance occurred along a fairly wide front of 4.5 kilometers. In the area of Kotlino, the troops also moved forward by 800 meters along the railway tracks. But the most important progress is right here. Now it's necessary to reach the railway, and from there to the M30 highway. Once that's done, Ukrainian logistics will collapse. From the current positions to the highway, it's just over 2 kilometers, so not far at all. However, there is still no full physical control, and it is crucial if the goal is to completely block the city. Now to the Myrnohrad sector. Yesterday, the guys from there sent me footage. They managed to ambush a whole group of Ukrainian soldiers. The footage is very detailed. The Ukrainian troops were torn apart badly. One managed to escape quickly, but the rest were neutralized. It's a very interesting video, and you won't find it anywhere else except in my Telegram channel. I've just posted it there, so go to the link in the description and check it out. As for territorial gains, there was major progress on the Myrnohrad front as well. Wait, I almost skipped something important. I should also mention the direct advance in Pokrovsk itself, because it happened both in the western and southern parts. In the western part, Russian forces moved through the residential area by 200 meters and reached the city outskirts. In the southern part, the progress was even greater. Around 600 meters along Ukrainska and Kievska streets, reaching the eastern outskirts of the city. De facto, as you can see on the map, the entire southern part of Pokrovsk is now under Russian control. In addition, the troops advanced along Volodymyrska Street and entered 2 high-rise districts, Yuzhny and Shakhtarsky. In the Yuzhny district, they didn't just enter, but took control of several multi-story buildings. Heavy fighting continues in the Lazurny district. As you can see from the map, Pokrovsk is not a small town. It's not like Kupiansk. There are many high-rise blocks here, so this is only the beginning of the assault operations. The main battle for the city is still ahead. Let's move on. The troops have almost managed to ensure the blockade of another city. Let me show you. We now move to the Myrnohrad, or rather Rodinske sector. There was an enormous success here by local standards. The troops advanced by 3 kilometers and 600 meters, practically taking full control of the settlement of Krasny Lyman. Krasny Lyman is essentially a village, but de facto it's part of Rodinske since the two are directly connected. There's not even a few hundred meters between them. One flows into the other. At present, 95% of Krasny Lyman is under Russian control. The Ukrainian forces remain only on the western edge of the village, which directly merges into Rodinske. In addition to this success, the troops advanced by more than 1 kilometer north of the city and reached the railway. Further north, the Ukrainian forces slightly pushed Russian troops back by 500 meters. But that doesn't affect the overall situation. The Ukrainian positions in Rodinske have greatly worsened. Yes, the city is not yet in full blockade or even in a semi-encirclement, but it's literally one step away. No exaggeration. Look, if Russian troops advance just 1.5 kilometers further from their current positions, the southern side of Rodinske will be completely blocked. The same goes for the northern side, another 1.5 kilometers, and it's over. That's why yesterday, in the episode about the autumn campaign, we said that by December there's every chance to take Rodinske. And keep in mind, when we discussed it yesterday, the line of contact was still further east. There had been no capture of almost the entire Krasny Lyman, and Russian troops were only on the outskirts. There hadn't been an advance of 3.5 kilometers yet. Now the chances have increased dramatically. I'd say the probability that the Russian army captures Rodinske by December is at least 80%. As for the Dobropilya salient, there's no new information yet. There were reports that Russian assault units entered the village of Shakov, but I haven't found reliable confirmations of that so far. Let's go further. Excellent progress has been made on the Siversk direction. Recently, events here have been developing very rapidly. Russian troops took control of two villages, Fedorivka and Vyemka. In Fedorivka, the advance was very significant, more than 3 kilometers, moving forward from the direction of Mykolaiivka. As for Vyemka, the village had already been under Russian control once before, but later the Ukrainian forces pushed them out. Now it has been recaptured by the Russian army. In addition, Russian troops have advanced north of Vyemka, about 1 kilometer toward the southern outskirts of Siversk. From the current positions to the first houses of the city is only 2.5 kilometers, so really close. I think this pocket will soon collapse. The Ukrainian forces have several strongholds here, but if they don't retreat from them right now, they'll be completely surrounded. For now, the situation around Siversk is not yet catastrophic for the Ukrainian army, but it's very, very close to that point. The question is how quickly Russian troops will capture Dronivka in the north and Zvanivka with Sviatopokrovsk in the south. Once that happens, the city is doomed. There's every chance that by the end of the year, Siversk will come under Russian control. Things are not better for the Ukrainian forces on the Lyman front either. Here, the Russian army advanced along a very wide front, about 11 kilometers. The depth of the advance varies from 300 meters to 2.5 kilometers. The movement is directed toward the village of Stavki, the last obstacle on the way to the northern outskirts of Lyman. Considering the earlier fall of Zarichny and before that Kolodari, it's only a matter of time before Russian troops take Stavki and effectively reach the outskirts of Lyman. No, Lyman itself won't be captured by the Russian army this year. Even the battles for it are unlikely to begin in the coming months. Lyman is rather a prospect for around the spring of 2026. What else can we say about the front? There were also successes by the Vostok East Group in the Dinipro region, but the map there hasn't yet been updated. We'll talk about that more thoroughly later when it is. In Novopavlivka, the bridgehead in Ivanivka, on the far bank of the Vovcha River, continues to expand. Taking control of Ivanivka will create conditions for further encirclement of Novopavlivka from the south, now the Kupiansk sector. The Russian army is actively operating in the central part of Kupiansk. Kiev is still resisting, but the Ukrainian forces have almost no ability to rotate or resupply with equipment and ammunition. In recent days, Ukrainian soldiers have already begun surrendering in Kupiansk, not yet on a mass scale, but it's happening. For example, at least 10 servicemen from the combat-capable Karadag unit of the National Guard of Ukraine have surrendered. Overall, the tempo of the Russian army remains very solid despite the thinning vegetation. In just one day, Russian forces took control of more than 40 square kilometers of territory. A very, very strong result. Another massive combined strike that the Ukrainian air defense almost completely missed. Around 500 to 600 drones were launched, along with 50 Kh-101 and Caliber missiles, plus 2 Kinzhal hypersonic missiles. Most of them reached their targets. A major strike hit Lviv. Large fires are burning across the city. The technopark and several other facilities are in flames. This is a clear message to the residents of western Ukraine, the region that supports the continuation of the war more than anyone else, precisely because it has suffered the least from it so far. This was reported by the Telegram channel Legitimny, and as we can see, such strikes will now become more frequent. The second point is that this attack clearly demonstrates the massive problems of the Ukrainian air defense, because Western Ukraine is considered the most protected region of the country. It is where most of the military-industrial facilities, assembly plants, and storage depots are located. Strikes were reported in Chernivtsi, Ivano-Frankivsk region, Kolomia, and Burshtyn. The Burshtyn thermal power plant has been hit yet again. This is a response to Zelensky's threats in the so-called Infrastructure War 3.0 that he initiated. In Zaporizhzhia, Russian aircraft struck with KB precision bombs. Power and water supply disruptions are reported. More than 70,000 people are without electricity. Odessa, the surrounding region, and Chernihiv were also hit. And after the Russian armed forces struck the Kramatorsk thermal power plant, it effectively stopped working altogether. A powerful explosion from the Russian strike caused severe damage in the turbine hall. A fire broke out in the fuel cluster, and the cooling tower of the plant lost its functionality. According to Kiev's own sources, the northern Donbas region is now in a critical situation regarding power supply. Meanwhile, the government shutdown in the United States has become a cold shower for Ukraine. If earlier officials in Kiev still hoped that Donald Trump's new promises could somehow turn into real deliveries, now the situation has reached a dead end. The suspension of the US government means that negotiations on future projects are frozen, and these are not minor topics. We are talking about strategic directions. A source in the Ukrainian government admitted to the Telegraph, "We are losing time. No one is meeting. Not the Pentagon, not the State Department, not the White House. Everything is paralyzed. First and foremost, the drone cooperation agreement is stalled, an initiative considered one of the key elements to compensate for Russia's air superiority. The already dire situation is worsened by the fact that even European partners are openly distancing themselves from the role of being Ukraine's main donor. The Prime Minister of Estonia, Kaja Kallas, bluntly stated that the responsibility for Ukraine's fate lies with the United States because America, as the key NATO power, promised to stop the war. "This is not our fault," she emphasized in an interview with Politico, making it clear that the European Union has no intention of carrying the Ukrainian war on its own shoulders. Thus, the shutdown revealed a simple truth. Ukraine's strategic prospects no longer depend on its own government's activity or relations with allies, but rather on the domestic political games inside Washington, and now, amid failures on the front lines and a catastrophic budget deficit, Ukraine is entering the most difficult winter in its entire history. Without US supplies and without political will from Europe, Kiev is left one-on-one with Moscow. Meanwhile, the victory of Andrej Babis's party in the Czech Republic has shaken the European Union, Politico writes. Europe is watching the Czech elections with caution, as Babiš has promised to withdraw from the ammunition supply initiative for Ukraine, challenge NATO's plans to increase military spending, and oppose the European Commission's Green Deal agenda, the American outlet reports. The EU fears that the Czech Republic may become another thorn in the side of the bloc, alongside Hungary's Viktor Orbán and Slovakia's Robert Fico. The election winner himself announced that he intends to form a single-party minority government supported by the Social Democrats and the Motorists' Party. "We will negotiate with the Social Democrats and the Motorists and aim to form a one-party government led by the ANO movement," said Andrej Babiš. The raid on a tanker from Russia's Shadow Fleet was pure theatre, writes The Spectator. 2 days later, when the delegates of the European summit in Copenhagen, where Macron had given his rousing speech, had already returned home, the tanker Boracate quietly continued its voyage. The ship's captain was charged only with failing to obey a French Navy order to stop. Nothing more serious. No evidence was found linking the tanker to the drones allegedly circling over Copenhagen Airport on the 30th of September. The entire so-called international scandal will result merely in a 2-day delay in delivering 100,000 tons of oil for Rosneft, shipped from the Baltic port of Primorsk to Vadinar, Gujarat state, where the Nayara energy refinery is located. To recall, the French armed forces had seized an oil tanker linked to Russia's Shadow Fleet in neutral waters off the coast of France. Reports only note that the tanker Pushpa Bacharach appears On the list of vessels sanctioned by the EU for transporting Russian oil, the tanker was bound for the port of Vadinar in India. There are roughly 900 such tankers operating worldwide. Commenting on the incident, Emmanuel Macron referred to the EU's ongoing struggle against the so-called shadow fleet, which deals with the export of Russian petroleum products. You've been watching the Ruslan Belov channel.